of you here, and I hope you'll make some good connections tonight. So, to kick us off, we first want to start by giving some awards. The first person that we want to recognize, I'm not sure I got the right person here. First, we would like to recognize Michael Halley. Councilman in Fairfield. He's spent many years as an engaged and responsive city councilor in Fairfield. He's had pro-environmental efforts the whole time. He's made us a much more resilient community and has given us a better quality of life. So we thank him for his consistent efforts, including, here's a few. He worked to establish the city composting site. He helped to coordinate activities and engagement with Fairfield's first sustainability coordinator, Scott Tim. He secured Fairfield as a Soul Smart Community bronze level designee, collaborated with the urban forester to create a tree policy for Fairfield. He partnered with engineers on energy efficiency measures for the city buildings. He advocated for roof engineering of the Cambridge Sportplex so that at some point it can be solarized. He promoted the design and installation of additional Central Park dining tables, including handicapped accessible seating, and he pursued and received designation of Fairfield as a pilot city for the Resilient Iowa Communities program. In addition, I'm sure all of us have seen Michael around pulling weeds on the square or providing sweat equity by laying bricks for the new seating and so on and so forth, and taking care of the flower needs. So Michael, we thank you for your many years of service. An important partnership that's been put together. And this partnership it's a joint award. It's in recognition of the partnership that we built to make a resilient community model. Speak up. Oh, you can't hear me? No. Sorry. So this is in honor of the partnership that has been put together to hire a new sustainability coordinator and to build us a resilient community model. Is that any better? Yeah. Okay. So, foundational to that partnership, there are certain individuals, and for the last 2 years, nearly 30 people have been representing different interests in our community, and they've come together to make this a reality. And there are specific people that we want to honor for that. The first one we'd like to honor is Doug Flournoy, who's a current city councilman. And he's a almost retired chemistry professor at Indian Hills and a current city councilman. And he's been instrumental in helping us build this three-way bridge between the city, the university, and the Sierra Club, and has helped us secure some of the initial seed money for the city, for the sustainability coordinators. So, Doug. A really great friend to the Sierra Club and the Vice President of Operations at MIU, or as we like to say, the Vice President of Sustainability, is Tom Brooks. Tom was key to securing the first financial commitment from the university for the Sustainability Coordinator, and he has continued to work closely as part of the resilience team. Tommy. And the third party that's part of this partnership that we'd like to honor tonight is Ashley Hood. She's the Executive Director of Pathfinders, which is where our new Sustainability Coordinator is going to be employed and housed. Ashley's out of town and she couldn't be with us tonight, but we have a lovely fact for Ashley as well. And I'm going to turn the program over now to Ann Walton, who's a chairperson of the Sierra Club.
Well, thanks to everybody for being here tonight. We're really pleased with the number of people that showed up, and we can only guess from that that you're very concerned about many of the same things that we're concerned about here at Sierra Club. So thanks for being here. We tried to pick a venue that would be appropriate to the topic for tonight and to get out of town for a change. So thanks for stopping by. As mentioned earlier, the Sustainability Coordinator is really something we are so pleased about after spending 2 years on this. The seed funding for a Sustainability Coordinator was provided by, as we said earlier, the City of Fairfield vis-a-vis the City Council, thanks to Doug Flournoy, and Maharishi International University, thanks to Tom Brooks. The position is now funded for 3 years by donations from 56 different businesses and individuals. So we consider this really a community sustainability coordinator, and we have to say that we took our job very, very seriously in the hiring of our new sustainability coordinator because we saw ourselves as representing 56 different entities. All of these efforts were coordinated through the partnership, as Mark said, by MIU, the City of Fairfield, Pathfinders, and Southeast Iowa Sierra Club. During the 5-month candidate process, 40 resumes were received, primarily from the Midwest, but are also from around the U.S. as well as internationally. So we had a wide range, geographic range of interest in the position. Of the resumes received, we interviewed 14 candidates, and 5 of those made it to a second interview. So that's like 20 hours worth of interviews for our team. From several highly qualified finalists, Rachel Hillier emerged as the best match for the Fairfield community. So Rachel, you can come up. I don't know where you are. Why we picked Rachel. She has a very diverse background, which includes 2 decades of experience in education, renewable energy, small business consulting, while working with both the public and private sector, which is an important part of the sustainability coordinator's job. She's undertaken successful grant writing, research, advocacy, and lobbying across state agencies and public institutions. Rachel owned a micro-urban farm, and you can ask her what that means, and managed other acreage where she focused on soil restoration, waste management, marketing challenges, scalability assessments, and capacity building. She holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Iowa and a master's degree from the University of New Mexico, where she came from very recently, but she's actually been in Fairfield for the last 2 years. We're excited to pair Rachel and her skills with the resources and the guidance of the Resilient Iowa Communities program, which thanks to Michael, we are now a pilot project. Fairfield, Iowa is now a pilot project under the University of Northern Iowa's Resilient Iowa Communities program. And we look forward to Rachel moving our community forward towards greater resilience, flexibility, and quality of life. So thank you. Thank you. I'll hand it over to you to say a few words to everybody.
Well, I thank you so much, and it is true, they were very thorough in asking me many questions, and in fact, one of the things, they had really thought through what they were really looking for and what we were really going to be doing together. And I think that made a huge difference in my enthusiasm getting started here. And it sounds like, you know, the path has been cleared. A lot of, and a lot of people have done a lot of work around sustainability and resilience for Fairfield. And I'm really impressed with some of the work that I've already been able to look through, just getting started. But there is a lot of resources in this town, a lot of enthusiasm. And I'm really looking forward. I grew up in Iowa, and I came home, and I'm feeling welcomed, and I feel like this is a great opportunity of a lifetime for me to really work together with the community and have all these synergistic opportunities for us to make Fairfield more resilient as we move into this new uncertain future. And thank you all, and I look forward to meeting you and talking more about your ideas.
So this is Rachel's first week. She's been on the job since Monday. So please make her feel welcome and introduce yourselves. She wants to meet everybody and hear about the work that you're doing. And if you don't get a chance to talk to her tonight, she certainly will be knocking at your door soon, I'm sure. So,
Great.
thank you, Rachel. Okay, so we'll move on.
Now we'll move on to the main topic of this evening's meeting, water quality in Iowa. I'm Gloria Foster, a member of the Executive Committee. We chose this location for our quarterly meeting because Lake Darling exemplifies an especially poignant story about both the successes and the challenges of addressing water quality in Iowa. Though we think this is one of the most critical environmental issues facing our state, our focus as an Executive Committee is on the 4 aspects of our strategic plan, which we've presented to you in the past and which are outlined in our website. We feel it is important for all of us to be educated and understand the sources and human behaviors that are contributing to the over 700 impaired water bodies in Iowa. But our Executive Committee members have all the current projects we can handle right now. We need help, passionate and caring and energetic volunteers to spearhead an effort that we hope will make a positive difference in our state's water and in our lives. We hope that our speakers will teach us how, working together, we can make a difference. As we get started down the road on this topic, I introduce first Dr. John Eichert. John is Professor Emeritus of Agricultural Economics at the University of Missouri. He is the author of Sustainable Capitalism, A Return to Common Sense, and Small Farms Are Real Farms. John will open the session with a few of his heartfelt words on clear water, the lifeblood of livable communities. John.
Appreciate the opportunity to be here. When Ann asked me to say a few words to help frame tonight's discussion, as most of you know, I'm an economist. I'm not a water quality expert, so I had to scratch my head and say, well, what am I going to say here? But I remembered that Ed Malloy had invited me to speak at the statewide water quality conference in Fairfield a few years back. It's called Clean Water and Livable Communities. So I decided that I would just read a few excerpts from the paper I prepared for that presentation to kind of introduce the topic tonight. I started that presentation by saying, water is life. This is a common refrain in the environmental and indigenous rights movements, but it's also literally true. The human body is mostly water, ranging from about 50 to 70% of total body weight. The bloodstream that carries the oxygen needed to energize our body is nearly all water. So water is obviously critical to life. But water is also the lifeblood of livable communities. Webster defines lifeblood as the seat of vitality, the life-giving force. Definitions of living communities vary, but all of them seem to focus on community attributes that are essential for a desirable quality of life, not just economically, but also socially, ecologically, aesthetically, even spiritually. Water quality obviously affects us economically, but water also affects our environmental, social, aesthetic, and even our spiritual quality of life. Clean water alone obviously is not sufficient to ensure the health and livability of communities, just as water alone cannot sustain life. But much like healthy blood nourishes the human body, clean water nourishes the health and vitality of our communities. Chemical and biological deficiencies and imbalances in the bloodstream indicate a threat to human health. Likewise, chemical and biological pollution of streams and groundwater indicate threats to community health and to livability. The warning signs that you see on the beach here at Lake Darling indicates a threat to the health and livability of this community, of our community of southeast Iowa. Iowa has a major water quality problem. Even the governor's office has grudgingly accepted water quality as a political priority. However, the voluntary measures of Iowa farmers to reduce water pollution, while admirable when they're taken seriously, haven't been enough in the past, aren't enough now, and will not be enough in the future. A statewide epidemic of unregulated agricultural water pollution is destroying both the present and future livability of Iowa's rural communities and the drinkability of water in its urban communities. Meanwhile, meaningful actions, let alone real solutions, are not even on the political horizon. It's time for the people of Iowa to demand fundamental change in their government's approach to protecting water quality. The most basic responsibility of any government is to ensure the safety and health of its constituents, regardless of the economic cost to the perpetrators or to the polluters. The economic, ecological, social, aesthetic, and spiritual health and livability of the state of Iowa depends on its government taking meaningful actions to clean up its polluted waters. We have a social and moral responsibility for stewardship of the water. It's a matter of life. Thank you.
Slides? That would be good.
Actually, we won't want them when we have the PowerPoint on.
I know, but right now we don't have it on. Well, thank you, Dr. Eichert. You have given us a call to arms. Now I'll introduce our main speaker for the evening, Dr. Chris Jones. He is a hydrologist at the University of Iowa. He coordinates activities related to the Iowa Water Quality Information System and conducts research on nutrient and sediment transport and general water quality data and information such as nitrate, pH, and dissolved oxygen concentrations, discharge rates, and temperature. He also has a marvelous podcast called We All Want Clean H2O. Chris will be presenting an overview of water quality across the state of Iowa and the major contributing sources of pollutants, as well as Iowa's significant contribution to the Mississippi River catchment area and the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. Dr. Jones.
Well, I'm happy to be invited here tonight to speak to you folks, and I've been down here in Fairfield to speak a few times over the past few years, and been here to Lake Darling, and so I know some folks down here, so it's my pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me. And so I'll talk to you about some things tonight, and hopefully give you some things to think about. And so I would tell you that I post all my slides on my website, so if anybody wants my slides, they can go there and download them. I don't have these on there yet, but I'll have them on there tomorrow. And so you can see that presentations, maybe you can see that there, that's where I post them. I also write essays pretty regularly and put them in that blog post page, and if you're interested in my thoughts on things, you can go there and see what those are. And some of those aren't terrible, I think, but anyway, you can be the judge of that. And so yes, I do manage the university's water quality sensor network. We have a system of water quality sensors deployed around the state of Iowa, about 70 sites measuring water quality continuously, mostly in streams, but also some groundwater and some surface water lakes. And so you can see the sites there. The funding for the system comes mainly from 3 places. One is the Iowa Nutrient Research Center, which is at Iowa State University. It's funded through the groundwater tax. Used to fund the Leopold Center, doesn't anymore, funds the Nutrient Center. And so that funds my job and 2 field staff that operate and maintain the system. We have sites funded through the Iowa Watershed Approach Project, which is money from the Housing and Urban Development. And then we also harvest data from USGS sensors around the state. I think they have about 8 or 10 sites right now. And so that all goes into the system. We measure nitrate at all the sites, and then a subset of the sites we're measuring temperature, pH, conductivity, dissolved oxygen, and turbidity. And all that data goes onto this marvelous website. And it's really quite a useful tool for people to learn about water quality in Iowa. Some real geniuses designed this thing. That wasn't me, some other guys. And so it's really a great tool. And so you can click on one of the sites, and it'll delineate the watershed area upstream of the monitoring site, tell you what the nitrate is, tell you what the discharge, the flow of the river is, and a lot of other data. You can get precipitation information on there. Land use, you can see what percentage of the watershed is in crops, what percentage is in urban areas, and so forth. And it's really a marvelous tool. And so I'd invite you to check that out if you haven't. And so when I talk to people about water quality in Iowa, I always say you need to understand Iowa's geologic past if you're going to understand water quality. And our geologic past is one of glaciation. And so Iowa has been, glaciers have intruded into Iowa, we think 7 times, but there's been 3 main events. The first one is the pre-Illinois event where ice descended over the entire state pretty much down to the present course of the Missouri River. That ended 500,000 years ago. We had the Illinoisan period where ice kind of intruded into southeast Iowa. And if you know Iowa City, you know Iowa City's pretty hilly, and you drive just south of Iowa City and it gets pretty flat, and that's where the ice came over in the pre-Illinoisan period. And actually the Mississippi prehistoric channel, the Mississippi River, was actually the Cedar River bed in the present day. And so that's where that ice was. And then lastly, the one we talked about most, the Wisconsin Glacier. This tongue of ice came down from Minnesota into north central Iowa. And so this ended only 10,000 years ago, very, very recently. And so what we see in that part of Iowa is all very new, okay, very fresh. And so because of glaciation, Iowa, and the erosion that has occurred throughout the millennia, we have these different landforms in Iowa. And so when we drive across Iowa, to the casual observer, they might think, well, it all looks homogeneous. And we only have 2 species out there, right? Corn and soybeans. And so it looks the same to most people. But if you know what you're looking for, you can see where the landforms change and where the glaciers were and weren't. And so you can see there the Des Moines Lobe, where the Wisconsin Glacier was, the southern Iowa Drift Plain, where we are now. Northwest Iowa Plains and the Iowan surface were both prehistoric tundras that were shaped by wind erosion from wind blowing off that Wisconsin Glacier. The Paleozoic Plateau in northeast Iowa, a lot of people call that the driftless area, right? Thinking there's never been glaciers there. Well, there has been in the driftless area, at least the Iowa portion. The Wisconsin part of the driftless is the only one that has not had any glaciation at all. And then we have the major river floodplains. And so prior to Europeans getting here, this is what Iowa looked like. We had the wetland ecosystem, the oak savanna, and the tall grass prairie. And of course, that's all gone, right? We've all plowed that up for crops. About 70–75% of our land now is in crops, as you can see there in brown. We still have some pasture and some timber in south central Iowa and then northeast Iowa primarily. And in that pre-settlement period, we know that the prairie streams that we had were these wide, shallow streams, okay, that had a rocky or a sandy or gravel bottom. We had perennial cover on the stream banks with the prairie, okay, so we never had any bare soil. The streams came out into the floodplain very frequently, okay? And we had clean water species in our streams like smallmouth bass and pumpkin seed sunfish, and then the generalist species, the catfish, channel catfish. And then we got here, and one of the main things we did was we started draining the land, right? And so much of Iowa is pretty wet. Our soils hold a lot of water. They're called hydric soils. We get pretty abundant rainfall here most years, and so the landscape was wet. To crop it, we needed to dry it out. And so we started digging, especially in the Des Moines Lobe area, but also other places. And so you can see these fellows here, Boone County, putting in the clay field tiles about 100 years ago. We made these trapezoidal ditches with the steam shovels. And you can see in the modern day, on the right there, that's what it looks like. And so we lowered the water table 4 feet, basically over about 70% of Iowa. And so these big ditches, right, up in the upper right-hand stream there, are the drainage district ditches. And so we created thousands of miles of streams here, right? So there's many, many more miles of streams here than what there used to be. And we continue this drainage, right? And so those guys with down in the trench digging might have been able to do an acre a day. These guys can do, you know, an acre in a matter of an hour or so with these tile piles. And so as it has gotten wetter here in Iowa, farmers have been highly motivated to put in more tile and dry out the landscape, and that's the primary delivery mechanism for nitrate from farmed fields to the stream network. And so consequently, this is the start of many of our streams. This is what the beginning of our streams look like. And so these big county tile mains, in the northern 2/3 of the state, they form the beginning of our streams, and so that's the start of the Raccoon River near Marathon, Iowa. And so right here, this is the start of the Iowa River in north central Iowa. And so we can see the tiles coming in, the drainage ditch, and what we don't think about here is when we did this, we immediately put 3 foot ahead on the water. And so imagine before drainage, how these streams started. They were wetlands sort of gently overflowing into a stream channel. Now we immediately put 3 foot energy on that water. And so the streams are much more highly energized now than what they were. And so then in the 30s we came in and we started straightening streams. And so we used steam shovels and dynamite. And so this is Walnut Creek in Jasper County. The green line is the stream channel in 1930. The red line is the stream channel today. And so we cut that stream from 1,000 meters long to 500 meters long in that stretch. But the vertical distance from point A to point B is the same, right? But the stream has half the distance between A and B. So what we did is we sped up that water. We've made our water, we've added energy to our water, to our streams all over the state of Iowa. And so that's had consequences. Well, let me go back. And so this is what happened to our streams on the right. And so as we channelized them, they started eroding downward. Okay, they had this energy. We put levees along the stream banks so we could square up the fields and farm that stuff. And so the stream still wants to erode. And so it erodes downward. And so consequently, most of our streams in Iowa here are about stage 4, right here at this point of degradation. And so I tell people, a lot of these streams, they are not coming back, okay? Like the English River, it's been straightened. It's in this state of degradation. You know, to bring it back, we'd have to re-meander it. And I mean, you're talking about just a monumental amount of money to do that on a large scale. And so as we say, for a lot of this stuff in Iowa, it's going to take another ice age to bring it back. And so this is Walnut Creek in Jasper County, and so these streams have become so flashy now. And so this is the same spot. So you see that hill slope in the background, and that guy standing there. And that soil there in the bottom, in what we call the alluvium, about the first 4 to 6 feet of that has all been deposited since settlement. Okay? And so as we farmed the uplands and we got all this erosion, all that dirt didn't just go down to the Gulf of Mexico, it was deposited in the alluvium in the lowlands. And so all that stuff, since it was very recently deposited within the last century, it's loose, it's not consolidated, and so it's very vulnerable to erosion from being eroded away. And so these streams are so flashy because we don't have any vegetation on the landscape but for 4 months out of the year, and they've been straightened, and they have so much energy that these streams come up, and this is no kidding. This stream can go from here to here and back to there in 24 hours. And so that exposed soil, right, is really vulnerable to loss. So consequently, our streams are always muddy. And we think that it's because of field erosion. Well, that's part of it. But this is a lot of it. It's because of this change in hydrology and the fact that we've straightened all these streams. And so now, you know, all our streams are down in these canyons. And if you didn't know any better, you would think that's what they should look like, right? No, that's not what they were. And so now we have these pollution-tolerant species like carp and bullhead. We still have the generalist with the channel catfish that can tolerate these conditions. And so that hydrological condition that we have, none of our native species that we want to see in these streams, they didn't evolve in that condition, right? And so, you know, they can't survive. And so now we have the tile drainage. Instead of perennial cover on the stream banks, we have annual plants. Corn and soybean, they're only there 4 months. We've silted in the bottom, and so the gravel substrate that the desirable species need to spawn, you know, that's all silted in. The water table is much, much deeper now. And so like this stream here on the right side, that's the South Skunk River, southeast of Ames. And I mean, it's straightened for, you know, a couple 100 miles. And, you know, what species evolved to live in that, you know, sort of condition? None, right? And so all we have are these species that we don't want. And so at the same time we were doing all this hydrological modification, we also were transforming our farming systems. And so this is very famous illustration by a guy, DNR made it in the 1970s. In fact, I just met that guy a few months ago. He's still alive. This is Winnebago County, and you can see we had a big diversity of land uses on a farm. And so not only did you have corn, but you had a few soybeans, you had oats, a lot of pasture, hay, and so on. And then this same farm, we fast forward to 1976, you know, and it's almost all corn and soybeans. There's still a few oats left there. Those would be gone in the present day. And so we simplified our farming systems, okay? We went from diverse systems to real simple systems. And so now our farms look like this, and you know, you drive through here and you think, wow, that looks clean, right? Really clean. And so we have the GMO crops, you know, no weeds out there at all. We have, you know, 1 out of every 3 hogs in the United States, 25 million hogs. This Washington County is the top hog county in the state. You can drive across the whole state and never see a hog, right? And so they're all in these buildings up on the horizon. And then we have ethanol. And so this is our farming now in Iowa. And to the casual observer, it looks very clean. But in fact, you know, this is all a very leaky system that we know, you know, pollutes our water resources. And so then we add to that, you know, the livestock industry, and we have about 8,000 permitted animal feeding operations now. You can see they're not evenly distributed around the state. A lot in northwest Iowa, a lot here in southeast Iowa, and then north central Iowa. And so, you know, we have an issue of scale here, the way we're trying to farm. It's not that these individual farmers are doing this, that, or the other thing wrong. We are trying to do things at such a scale here, in a way that's not regulated, that unless everybody is doing everything perfectly, you know, we're going to have bad water. And so, as I said, we have a problem of scale, and that's one thing we never want to talk about. You know, we want to talk about these cost share practices that farmers can do, but we never stop and ask ourselves, is what we're doing here really what is possible? Or, you know, are our environmental objectives consistent with the scale of things that we're doing here? And I would say they are not. And so we have 70% of our land in annual crops. We have 11,000 square miles of the state of Iowa is used for ethanol production. So an area equivalent of 20 Iowa counties we've committed to grow corn for ethanol. We have 25 million hogs, and bear in mind that a hog reaches market weight in 6 months, so really in a year we have 50 million. 4 million beef cattle, 80 million laying chickens, 5 million turkeys, 4 million broiler chickens, and 22,000 dairy cows, 220,000 dairy cows. Can you do this here and still get clean water? And you know, you got a $14 million, I think, or $16 million project out here that you did only 8 years ago, and it's still polluted, right? And it's because we didn't think about this and say, wow, you know, can we make this out here consistent with this? And so what we've done here is have water quality consequences. The ones we talk about most, of course, are erosion, and then also the nutrient pollution. We've got problems with our drinking water. We have 7,000 private wells in Iowa that have tested above the nitrate, safe level for nitrate since the year 2000. 7,000 private wells. We always talk about Des Moines, right? The nitrate removal facility, the biggest in the world. People in Des Moines. It's really the rural areas of Iowa that suffer economically from this pollution. Des Moines, they've got the resources to cope with it. But these small towns, you contaminate their well. I mean, that's a financial burden for a town of declining population where much of the town is elderly. You know, what do you do with these places? And then, of course, we have what we do as consequences, you know, 2,000 miles away from here in the Gulf of Mexico with hypoxia. And then we see similar issues in the Great Lakes, especially Lake Erie. The farming systems in western Ohio and eastern Indiana are very similar to what we have here with tile drainage and a lot of livestock. And so, you know, we have the issues with Lake Erie. Again, the Gulf of Mexico, if you don't know, the nutrients from the corn belt get down into the Gulf. They catalyze these big algae blooms. The algae, as they die, they consume oxygen, right? And then that leaves the water unsuitable for the fish and the shrimp and whatever else. And so we have this dead zone. And so I always say, you know, we're killing off part of an ocean. When you kill off part of an ocean 2,000 miles away, you know you're not doing something right? And so, what is our contribution to that? And some of this is my own work that was published. And so here you can see Iowa, about 31% of our land drains to the Missouri, about 69% to the upper Mississippi. And you can see our place there in the entire Mississippi River Basin. Nitrogen, let's look at nitrate and nitrogen. The Missouri River watershed, huge, right? Goes clear to the Continental Divide. Iowa, we have 3.3% of the land in the Missouri River watershed. We contribute 12% of the water we contribute 55% of the nitrate to the Missouri River. And so the Missouri River some years would have almost no nitrate were it not for contributions from Iowa. And so you can see the green bar is our nitrate contribution, the blue bar is our water contribution, and the red line is our portion of the watershed. And so you can see 2006, 2011, the Missouri really would have almost no nitrate were it not for Iowa. The upper Mississippi, and so that's everything draining east in Iowa. We have 21% of the land, 21% of the water. We contribute 45% of the nitrate to the upper Mississippi. And that's the upper Mississippi we define basically as everything upstream of St. Louis, not including the Missouri. And then down at the Gulf, what we call the Mississippi Atchafalaya Basin, we have 4.5% of the land, about 6% of the water, and 29% of the nitrate. And so, you know, this dead zone, it's our problem. We own it, right? And so, you know, we have an obligation to other people in this country to clean up our act. And so is it getting better or worse? Well, for nitrate, it most clearly is getting worse. We look, these lines are 5-year running annual averages. The red line is the state as a whole has about doubled since 2003 in terms of our nitrogen load. Areas going to the upper Miss have increased about 72%. Areas going to the Missouri have increased 191%. So why have things worsened so much rapidly in western Iowa? And it's because you know, that historically has been a lot of pasture in western Iowa that has been converted to row crops, especially with the emergence of the renewable fuel standard in 2005. And so when we started using corn for fuel in this country, we caused a lot of acres of corn that wasn't into crops to go into crops. And so that has consequences for the environment. And so the other thing we don't like to talk about here, and I know there's a lot going on here, but is we have a mass balance problem. We just cannot bring ourselves to admit that we have a mass balance problem. And what I mean by that is the inputs that we apply to the crops exceed what's removed in the grain by quite a large amount. And so these wide bars are the inputs. And you can see there's commercial nitrogen, hog manure, beef manure, and so forth. The yellow bars are what's being exported in the grain. The red bar, or red line, is the surplus, okay? And the blue line is what's in our streams. And so we know of this surplus, about 32% of it makes it into our streams. But we never want to talk about the surplus or the inputs. It's the third rail of Iowa agriculture to tell a farmer he's applying too much nitrogen. And so we know that Iowa State has their N-rate calculator where you can go in there, put in the price of corn, put in the price of nitrogen, and it'll give you a number of their recommended N-rate. And we know farmers are applying, you know, 25, 30, even 50% more than that recommended rate on the N-rate calculator. And so that surplus, it just doesn't go off into the Milky Way, right? It goes somewhere, and the somewhere is in our water. But, you know, we want to sell nitrogen in this state, right? We have, what, about 10 ag retail outlets in every county per average. I mean, we sell billions of dollars of nitrogen. Nobody wants to sell less nitrogen. Right? If you're selling stuff, do you really want to sell less of it? If that's how you're earning your living? No. But we just cannot bring ourselves to talk about this. And so this is all summarized in this paper here. If you're interested, it's open access. And like I said, if you can't remember, you can get the slides tomorrow. And so I thought I'd also spend a little bit of time tonight talking about some work I did on this water quality index. And so DNR contracted with me about 5 or 6 years ago now to create a new water quality index for the state of Iowa. What is that? It's a single value, a single number that can can tell you how good the water is, okay? And this is a concept that goes back a long time. And so Iowa had a water quality index. DNR created it in 2005. It was based on this one created by the National Sanitation Foundation. And agriculture didn't like it because it always rated our streams poorly. And so this is the old index here, and you can see the years and the percentage of our streams that measured very poor, poor, fair, and good. And certain groups in agriculture hated this thing, you can imagine, because they saw it as bad publicity. In some years, you know, almost no streams rated good or excellent. And so there was a budget problem in DNR, and they couldn't do pesticide monitoring anymore. That caused their water quality index to collapse, so they contracted with me to create a new one, which I did. They never adopted it. It sits on the shelf there in the Wallace building. But anyway, a year or two ago, I decided I was going to try to give this thing some legs, and so here I am. And so this is my index where I rate all the waters, all these watersheds across the state, okay? And my index is based or patterned after the water quality index used in the province of Alberta and Canada. And so using their scales here, you can see greater than 96 excellent, 81, 95 good, and so forth. And you can see where our waters are in terms of that scale, and then you can see where they are relative to each other in Iowa. And, our worst streams are in western Iowa. These are the ones that have been highly channelized and straightened. So if you've ever been out there and seen like the Boyer River, for example, it's a total ditch from the very top all the way down to the Missouri River. It's terrible. It's one of our worst streams. Our best streams are in northeast Iowa, Bloody Run Creek, which has been in the news a lot, 11,000 head cattle confinement going in up there. That's our best stream. The upper Wapsie above Independence is pretty good. The head waters of the Cedar are pretty good. And so you don't need to see all of this, but when I looked at trends going back to 2000, at these 44 sites, 3 out of 44 are improving using my index. And so 16 out of 44 relatively unchanged, 25 out of 44 getting worse. And so my index is based on nitrate, phosphorus, turbidity, E. coli, and dissolved oxygen. Okay, so you can see the water here is not getting better. Okay, only 3 streams getting better. The stream that's improving the most is the North River at Norwalk. And so guess what's happening there? Urbanization, right? Des Moines is urbanizing to the south and west, taking land out of agriculture, putting it in urban area, and that's our stream that's improving the best, improving the most. And so here I'm at the end of my career, and so people ask me what we need to do, and what I say is save Northeast Iowa. It's the only thing we have left that has any biological integrity. We only have about half the land that's farmed up there. And so we really, in my estimation, need to pull out all the stops to save what we have up there. It's the last thing that we have that's still got some integrity. Okay, the streams aren't straightened. They still have the rock and gravel substrate, and so let's save it. If we're going to spend public money, let's do it up there. This is what I call the hopeless zone, the hopeless area. The streams are all incised. They're all down in these canyons. You know what they look like, right? You live here. And so the amount of money it would take to repair this is monstrous. okay? And so why we use our tax dollars to do watershed projects, for example, in the Floyd River, in far northwest Iowa, that has one permitted CAFO per section, okay? Is 890 square miles approximately in the Floyd River watershed. We have 860 or 880 permitted confinements. Why would we do that? It makes no sense. We have a problem of scale there, that the amount of money we would have to spend to overcome that, it just does not make sense. And so how do we ever overcome these structural drivers to bad water quality? And what are those? Well, you know, monocropping with the corn and soybeans. And, you know, some of you maybe have heard of Matt Liebman. He's retired now, professor at Iowa State. Spent his whole career advocating for these diverse farming systems with extended rotations that would include other crops beyond the corn and soybeans. And so he has his various rotations there, and that's one of them, corn, soybean, oat, and 2 years of alfalfa. This extended rotation uses 91% less nitrogen fertilizer, 97% less herbicide. The weed biomass in both of these systems was similar, even though you're using 97% less herbicide. Soybean sudden death syndrome was almost eliminated. The soil health was better. The stream or tile nitrate was 57% lower. Soil erosion was cut in half. Used 60% less fossil fuel. And the net returns to the farmer were similar in both of these systems. And so why don't we do this is the question. And so, you know, there's theories on this, but, you know, to do this takes time, okay? To farm corn and soybeans these days, if that's all you do, that doesn't take too much time, right? You know, the 2 weeks planting, 2 weeks spraying, 2 weeks harvesting, and then go to Florida. And so we have a lot, and I'm sorry to say this if I insult anybody here, but we have a lot of people in Iowa that are working 6 and 8 week a year jobs that are making, you know, $250,000 a year. And all of that is indemnified by the taxpayer. So what, if you were one of these people, what would motivate you to change? Okay? So these farmers, I tell people this, the farmers, it's not that they're evil. The problem isn't that they're evil. The problem is that they're human beings. Right? And so if you're one of those human beings, why would you change? And so society has to demand a structure such that we can reconcile our environmental objectives while still maintaining some level of prosperity, you know, on our land. And I myself do not think it's fair to the average Iowan that we indemnify this farming system where a lot of these people are really making some righteous bucks. Not all of them, but a fair amount of them, okay? They have a lot of wealth built up in land, and we should not be indemnifying this system. If we do, we should have some say in how it is operated. And so can we regulate? Well, you know, regulation is not going to inoculate our water from pollution. People should understand that. But it can help us at least start changing this structure of things that produces the pollution. So, you know, I have my 5 things. Ban cropping in the 2-year floodplain. We have 400,000 acres in Iowa that are cropped in the 2-year floodplain. Why are we doing that? Every other year, the inputs to that land gone to the Gulf of Mexico. Ban fall tillage. Iowa State has been putting out guidance on fall tillage since the 1980s. It says one thing, don't do it, but you can drive all over Iowa in the state of November and, you know, 60–75% of it is tilled. Why are we doing that? I'll tell you why. Because these farmers have gotten so big, if they want to do tillage, they can't get it all done in the spring. Okay? And so they got to till some of it in the fall if they're going to do their tillage and if they're, you know, going to get down to Florida. Not my problem. Okay? Why should I accept that as an impairment for my water? Okay? I should not have to agree to that. Ban manure on snow and frozen ground. Yes, we do have some rules, but the loopholes are so huge that it's easy to get around them. And March 1st, you can start applying it. If there's snow on the ground on March 1st, you can bet your bottom dollar there's some manure on it somewhere. Make farmers adhere to the ISU fertilization guidelines, and then we need to reformulate these CAFO regulations. The way the manure management plans are currently constructed, we endorse an over-application of manure, okay? So the manure management plans have been created around the old yield goal formula for nitrogen application, and that strategy was discredited 30 years ago as a way to apply nutrients, but that is what our manure management plans are based on here in Iowa. And so consequently, farmers can over-apply manure nutrients by quite a large amount, and that activity is endorsed by the state. It's totally legal. We need to revisit that. And so the other thing I think we need to consider is, as we make these changes, we're not doing it in a system that has stationarity. Okay, things are changing, right? And so as we design our systems and we try to get the water quality that we want in the future, we have to understand the climate's changing. And so I get a lot of mileage out of this graph. This is the Raccoon River watershed. It's annual precipitation, and 100 years, I divide that 100 years into two 50-year chunks. And the first 50 years, precipitation in the Raccoon River watershed exceeded 1 meter, okay, 1,000 millimeters, exactly one time in 50 years. In the first 50 years, going back to 1916. In the last 50 years, it's exceeded 1 meter 15 times, okay? In the last 50 years, and in terms of drought, less than 600 millimeters in the first 50 years, 9 times, less than 600 millimeters in the last 50 years, only 2 times and none since 1980. And so a lot of us think, you know, 2012, wow, that was horrible, right? 2012 would barely even register, you know, as a severe drought here in this first 50 years. And so it's getting wetter here, right? It's getting wetter. And so what are farmers going to do as it gets wetter? They're going to put in more tile. They're going to do other things to make maximizing output on their fields, you know, a high probability. But a lot of those things, like applying more nitrogen. If it rains more, well, we know, the literature tells us, you know, what are farmers going to do if it rains a lot? They're going to come back with more nitrogen. Like I said, that first application, it didn't go into the Milky Way, right? If they lost it, it went into our streams. And so as it gets wetter, farmers are going to respond. And the way they respond is going to degrade our water. And so as we design our systems, we have to account for climate change. And so I end here with this graph here. What I did is I looked at all the livestock here and all our watersheds in Iowa. So these are all the Huckade watersheds in Iowa. There's 56 of them. I looked at the fecal waste that was being generated by all those livestock, converted it to a human equivalent, and there's the effective population that we have in all our watersheds in Iowa. Okay, and again, I say we have a problem of scale here. Can we do this and get the water that we want? And my opinion is no. And so as we move forward, You know, right now we have a system designed around commerce. The system we have is designed to maximize the amount of money that a few people in Iowa can make. Will we ever design a system around human nutrition? Okay? That's what we need to do. Yeah. If we can do that, maybe we can get the environmental outcomes that we want. And so thank you for inviting me to speak, and that's all I have.
Chris, some of the farm organizations are saying, based upon the adoption of conservation practices, that our water quality is getting better. I'm setting up for that, though, but tell me what you think about that. So
nobody really is saying that nitrogen is getting better. They are saying that, well, our practices that we implemented are sequestering or quenching, I think they're saying 1 million pounds of nitrogen per year. Well, maybe. I mean, we know what the book values are on these practices, and so from the literature. But at the same time we're implementing these practices, we're putting in more tile, we're bringing in more animals, we're doing other things, and so the farm groups don't like to look at both sides of the ledger, okay? They look at these practices and say, oh, look what we've done, things are getting better. But none of that integrates any actual water quality data. And so we hear all the time, oh, phosphorus has improved 27%. We've almost met the water quality goal for phosphorus reduction. Not a shred of water quality data goes into those statements. And so, in truth, we have a paper on phosphorus too that shows phosphorus loading increasing. And so if we're gonna, you know, what's our metric? Is our metric how many practices we can put on the ground, or is our metric how much could we improve our water? If it's a second thing, we have to look at both sides of the ledger. Yes?
Have you given all this information to the state legislature and people? How many times have you done that?
Well, not in a while. There was a few committees I testified before, but that was before I ever worked at the University of Iowa, and I don't think they're going to let me anywhere near that place these days. So, yes.
There was a thing on NPR in the last week, I think it was, about a stream in Iowa that came off the.
Yep. It's up in the Maquoketa River watershed.
And I think I heard that it took them a long time to do it, like 20 years.
20 years.
So that doesn't seem very optimistic.
So, and that was a Huck 12 watershed in Iowa, and I can't think of the name of that stream. Is it Duck Creek, maybe? Farmers Creek. It's in the Maquoketa watershed. Yes, they got it delisted. They got the cattle out of the streams, cover crops, all that. They got it delisted. It took 20 years. That's a Huck 12 watershed. There's 1,660 of them in Iowa. And so look how much money they spent up there. And so the Iowa Flood Center, I don't work there, but they're part of IIHR. They estimate for water quality in Iowa, it'll take about $1 million per year per Huck 12 watershed. So there's 1,660 of them, so that's $1.7 billion a year to do what they did up there at Farmers Creek. Yes, sir.
I've been away from the state for a while, got back. What about in the colleges here? Iowa has some brilliant minds in this agricultural state to study this stuff. Aren't the young people coming out of these colleges sort of taking over the family farms? And do they have better practices as opposed to the old school management?
So we've gotten rid of the mold board plow, right? And so we don't use the old John Deere plow anymore, except for on about 25% of the farms, which, you know, is way, way too much. And so we have done some things in terms of soil erosion, and we know for pretty good certainty that the sheet and rill erosion and the wind erosion has decreased in Iowa over the last 40 years or so. With nutrients, it's been a different story. We've had a really difficult time. And so, you know, there's lots of theories on that. Why can we not achieve nutrient improvements like we did with soil erosion? And the thing people forget about is the 1985 Farm Bill had conservation compliance. And so if you were farming highly erodible land in Iowa and you wanted to participate in federal farm programs, you had to adopt certain conservation compliance measures. It worked. We know for a certainty that that worked. We need conservation compliance for nutrients. There's nothing to compel farmers to adopt these practices. Nothing. And it does not help their bottom line, for the most part, to arrest this nutrient loss from their fields.
One other question. What are these blooms on the water coming in here? Is that nitrate? Is that too much oxygen in the water? What's going on?
No, it's nitrogen and phosphorus. And so it's totally nitrogen and phosphorus. And so I know when they restored the lake here, we get all these soil erosion things, right, to keep soil on the landscape. The problem is these soil erosion practices do really nothing for nitrogen, because nitrogen is really soluble. It comes through the tiles or through the shallow groundwater. And we did nothing to reduce the number of hogs upstream from this lake, right? So I don't know how many there are, but I know there are 39 manure management plans that claim 19 fields upstream from this lake. And so if you want to improve this lake, I mean, there you go. How do you deal with that? I don't have the answer.
Dr. Jones, thank you very much, even though I'm depressed. And that is, I've heard that under the current laws about water purification in Iowa, it would take 100 years to fix this thing. And we don't have that long. And I'm just wondering if you have any advice for us about what we might be able to do about it.
The huge opportunity that we have right now is to get rid of ethanol.
To get rid of what?
Ethanol. With the emergence of electric vehicles, and it's the best opportunity we've ever had to improve the environmental conditions. Now, do all those acres have to go out of production? No, right? And so let's figure out what to do with those acres now. Because when ethanol goes away, yes, it is going to affect land prices here. People are going to lose some wealth. There's no doubt. The price of land here is kept artificially high by the renewable fuels. So let's start figuring out now what to do with this land area that's the size of 20 counties. What can we do there to make the people farming and prosperous that will generate the environmental outcomes that we want?
Thank you. Our next speaker is Don Kline of Friends of Lake Darling. He's a former DNR fisheries biologist who was responsible for fisheries resources and management in a 10-county region of southeastern Iowa. And he worked on Lake Darling from 1971 to 2008. Don has been with Friends of Lake Darling since 2008, and we'll talk about some history of water quality at the lake, the involvement of the Friends group, water quality goals, and what was done to achieve those goals.
Thank you, and welcome to my lake.
Thank you for having us.
1971, I saw the old lake. And that's what I want to do first, is give just a little bit of background about the lake. Highway 192, and the entrance, you can see this is a 1950s photo, aerial photo. I didn't take it, but it's on the internet. Anyway, that's the way the lake looked in about the first year or two. We're just getting started. Let's see here, what do I got? There's the dam, it's up that way. There's the beach area, and that's just where we're at right here. It hasn't changed location, it's changed style a little bit. But you see, that was the first feature of the park, was the beach. This area over here was the original campground. It had to be moved before I got here in '71, it had to be moved to its present location because it had silted in front of it. That's where a lot of the lake filled in. I want you to notice this area over here, which would be, you can see the island, it's that area right over there. And look what it looked like in 1950. It was farm ground and pasture. And even underneath the water, they would have had fields up through here. There were very few trees near the lake. And again, notice these two areas, the upper end of the two major arms of the lake, this one here, the upper end, and then there's one that goes past the campground now, are the two major lakes. But you can see the water is clear up there. When I came in '71, you could boat clear up the creek, well, almost to the highway with a boat. And it wasn't very long you couldn't do that. So the lake has several inherent problems from the beginning. You can see the lake here, you can see the watershed. Lake Downing was 302 acres. The watershed, almost 12,490 acres, 40-to-1 ratio. We would never build a lake with that much watershed again. Matter of fact, our fisheries people did a lot of research, and now somewhere no more than 20-to-1. It keeps it, the 20-to-1 will keep it full, but not excessive. So that was an inherent problem. The other inherent problem is this lake faces northwest, and that's our prevailing wind. So the whole sweep of the lake gets wind. And that from the watershed, there's a lot of clay in the soil. The clay comes in, the heavy stuff will deposit out in the still water when it comes in, but the clay will continue out into the lake, and the clay particles repel each other. And they need the good loamy soil to have the positive and the negative, and they clump together and they settle out. So the clay doesn't settle out very fast. Here's what you might, I took this photo in probably 1973. It's taken right up here where that island would appear. And you can see the bluer water here, and you can see the cloud of water coming in after rain. And that cloud of water would, because we get so much water from the watershed, the cloud would fill the whole lake. On a smaller lake, it might come in and do the upper end, but not the whole lake. And our standard way of measuring water quality, which is a very good way to test whether you've got good water quality, is with a Seychelles disc. It's about 8 inches round. You can see it's got 4 different colors, 2 white, 2 black. You get out in a boat or in the dock, and you lower it down so you can't see it, and raise it up a little bit right there, and then you measure the distance up to the water level. And you keep track of that over time. It will tell you what kind of water quality generally you have in any body of water. But I couldn't stand that. I had to do something more because I was seeing a lot of problems in the lake. So I gathered my pickle jars together, and I made samples. The first one was late May, and then 2 in June, early and late, 2 in July, early and late, 2 in August, early and late, and then December and January. I took others, but wouldn't fit in the screen like that. Anyway, so I let them set. And if you look closely, you can see the silt in the bottom of the jar. It finally settles out if you wait long enough. But I stirred them up. It showed the comparison. You can see the comparison. In May and June, which would be usually the great times of productivity in the lake, it's so cloudy that you're going to get none here. So many years in a row, there was no real productivity. The fish survived, but they were skinny. Sometimes, several years, they would reabsorb some of their scales, and their body was real thin. So it just was not a good way to manage fishery. By the year 2000, DNR had decided that by this time that we should try to redo some lakes. It just so happened that Lake Darling was one of the first ones that they took on. Probably because I'd shown these bottles of water for years to people, and they took pity on me, I guess. Anyway, in 2000, they hired a watershed coordinator. And we were lucky. We got a local guy that knew the people, and because the first thing you have to do is you have to get the watershed under control before you can actually renovate the lake. So here's what happened. In 10 years, it took them 10 years, 59 landowners in the area, so that's 83% of the landowners signed up for some kind of conservation practice. 161 projects, mostly in Washington County, but there's a few in Jefferson and Keokuk County because the watershed covers those areas. 75% of the watershed land was covered by some kind of conservation practice. And we'll talk about several in a second. But before DNR would take on the lake restoration, 75% of the watershed had to be under some kind of control. So we're trying to at least slow the water down. $1.5 million were spent in the watershed. Probably $500,000 to $600,000 was from the landowners themselves. In other words, and the other was in the money projects. There's about 3 or 4 different money sources, generally through the Land and Water Agricultural Division. And if the theory was, and I think it's fairly true, that if we could get this done, we would reduce the amount of sedimentation by 95%. So but that took 10 years. Here's a map showing in 2010. Now, remember the watershed coordinator started in 2000. In 2010, this is the way the watershed looked. A lot of tile outlet terraces, contour farming. You can see some CRP ground in the green. You can see a lot of the white specks are ponds. This guy that was a coordinator, he liked ponds, mainly because obviously if the water comes into a body of water like a pond, the silt is going to come out. The nitrogens and phosphorus may go on through with the water, but the silt is going to come out, so that you're not going to deliver the silt to the upper end of the lake. That's the idea. Near the lake itself, the DNR tried to put a pond, and I think we did, on every little drainage around the lake. There's 27 of them. And in that same period, and it's important because though this area close to the lake, you would get almost 100% of the silt delivered to the lake because it's so close. So you need those ponds close by. Although they're not very big ponds, a lot of them, they do work. Now this shows you these 2 areas. By 2010, you can see the silt in the upper ends of both of these arms, where the arrows are. And I like this particular graph somebody drew up of the watershed because it kind of shows what they're trying to do. The yellow is the private landowners, ponds, so it's going to stop erosion. The blue and the red are the DNR ponds, as well as there's some risers near the roads. They raised those. And then the green over there you see is, we were, I guess, lucky. They were redoing the county roads here on this side, the east side of the lake. And the county engineer, instead of putting pass-through culverts, got with the landowners and built a pond. The roadway is the pond. There's I think there's three ponds, and you see how much area they cover. That the one over here, right there, that pond right there, stops about 10% of the watershed by itself. So we were lucky that the county was redoing the roads, and at the same time we wanted ponds. So it worked out very well. Hopefully now when they work around other lakes, they do the same thing now. Hope the word was passed on. And then in 2008, because the watershed coordinator was doing well, they put together the Lake Restoration and Water Quality Management Plan, and it's still available. You can look at it. It's quite a long document that explains a lot of facts and figures about what we're going to do. They generally come up with 4 main goals. One was water clarity. We wanted a satiety disk of at least 4.5 feet, 50% of the time. That's one of the goals. Safety, one of the beach, we wanted to meet the water quality standards. And that's generally E. coli and blue-green algae. Biota, we wanted diverse and sustainable biota. In other words, we want a good fishery. And all that goes along with that, because the fishery was not very good. And they want to sustain it for 50 years. That's the general goals. After you look through all the information, this is the goals that were set. Now, this is 2021. And you can see it's in, I think, right, you see this here, right here, I think it's because they had to match the aerial photos. It looks like one end of the lake is green and the other isn't, but I think it's the way they had to match the aerial photos right there.
So it's really all the same?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, 1950, 302 acres for the lake. 2008, 262. We'd lost about 37 acres of actual water. It was growing grass. But 2014, after the work was done and dredging out the upper end of the lake, we're back to 303 acres of water. And you can see this area here is that area over there that I showed you first. I had no trees. You can see the amount of trees that grew up there since 1950. And you can see all the way around the lake. This timber you see was not here in 1950. And then those two upper areas of the lake, you can see there's a silt basin here and a silt basin here. This is the causeway, and you can see that upper peninsula right there. The island we're seeing from here is right there. And there's another one up the way. And so they took silt out of those two areas, and they actually put it right here. They filled in an area right here inside the park and stabilized it so it won't erode. But they built silt basins so the water comes in and stops. Hopefully it settles out its heavy particles as it hits the still water, and then there'll be water flow through. And the idea is that in sometime 50 years from now, they may be able to dredge out those areas and rejuvenate the lake at that time. It was rededicated in 2014 after the project was done, and so we could talk about, now we've had a little bit of history on what the goals were. This shows you the satiety disk readings, and you can see some of these Early ones, 12 inches, 13 inches, made it down to 18 inches there in 2005, 2007. But this was the way it was for many years. If you saw down a foot in the water, that was a lot, because that was the average. And then you see 2014 is down here to 54 inches. This is what you would like, and it has remained. It's very clear lake right now. Interesting enough. So that part of it has worked very well. And the safety at the beach is the one area where we all like to see improvements. But there's the criteria. I don't know if you've seen the criteria they used before, but they go out on the beach about knee deep, take a sample, take it back, put I'm saying 1,000 milliliters of water in a petri dish, let it set for a couple of days, count the E. coli colonies that are produced, and so you get a figure like 5 samples in a 30-day period with 126 colonies or more, or a one-time sample with 235. And Lake Darling has met either one or both of those several times each year. So it still has E. coli out there, which E. coli in itself is not necessarily bad, but there are some bad E. colis. And so if you've got that much of E. coli, you're liable to have some bad ones. So that's why there's a warning to say, swim at your own risk. This is what you might see now. This is the beach area. You walk over there and you can see the blue-green algae here build up. The lake had come up and back down. You can see the blue-green on the grass. Blue-green algae is like almost like a paint. If it gets on something, it looks blue-green. And so that's part of the problem. And if I remember the water chemistry right, plenty of nitrogen. It's the phosphorus that's limited. Blue-green algae can take advantage of a small amount of phosphorus, and the beneficial algae doesn't do so well because there's not enough phosphorus. That's the way I understand the chemistry of it. On the biota, this is what you might see now. We never could grow any kind of rooted aquatic vegetation in the lake for all that time from 71 to 2008. We would go get from other areas, get some stuff, put it out here. We'd even put it in little cages, and it might survive in a little cage, but nothing outside. Just couldn't get any rooted aquatics to grow in the lake. Now this is what you'll see along the edges. You'll see several areas along here. It's generally American pondweed and leafy pondweed right now, with filamentous algae up in the top. But it's great. This is what I want as a fisheries biologist, because it's a great habitat for small fish. Lots of insects on the vegetation, and the fish come up and eat there, plus the big fish come up and eat the little fish. And the other benefit is, this is an armored shoreline, so it's not so bad, but aquatic vegetation out in the water buffers the wind action and saves the shoreline life. So you want aquatic vegetation. And that's one of the things when I talk to people all the time, they want to get rid of the vegetation because it inhibits their fishing. I want it because it makes fishing better. You just might have to be a little adaptive. And it has terrific benefits to the fishery. But they've had aquatic vegetation growing now that could never grow before until we cleared up the lake. And sustainability, 50 years, who knows? But we're up on eight years now, going on 10. It's an excellent lake right now compared to what it was. There's big fish, they're catching lots of fish. You can see trails, people are utilizing the area much more than they ever did before. And I mean, it's actually a problem because now they're coming back to swim. There were years where there were never anybody on the beach cleared up the water and they're coming back to swim, which is fine. I wish it didn't have the E. coli problems that it had, but they're still coming back to the beach to swim. And that's, gives you, in a nutshell, that's it.
Two questions, okay?
In the last few years, what % of the time have there been advisories for not swimming?
I think every year there may have been a year or two that hasn't been, but about every year there's at least 1 or 2 advisories.
For how long, usually?
Well, the once it starts, since you got that five-time average, if they have a real feeling, it's hard to get out of it, so it'll last for 2 or 3 months. Most of the open water season. So if you could get rid of that, you could make the lake a whole success.
Okay, one more question?
This is a comment, actually. Don, I used to swim in the lake in '75, and the changes are phenomenal, what your group has done. And if anybody, I highly suggest taking a bike or taking a walk all the way around the lake, because then you will actually see the ponds, and you will see all the work that they've done. And the challenges with E. coli that Francis brought up, we hope as a group of people who would like to do some volunteer work, that we can form a partnership with John and with Friends of Lake Darling and help, because they've done this massive amount of work on their own. And so I just wanted to thank you for the work that you did.
Thank you, Don. You've guided your lake to an improved and impressive healthy state. And I'm sure you'll keep it up.
Yeah.
So now I want to turn this over to Diana Christofiak, a current advisory council member for the Southeast Iowa Sierra Club and former board member.
I'm going to make this short, because what we'd really like to do now is to inspire you to, like I said, work with Don and form little committees. Can you all hear me?
Just talk a little louder.
Okay, and maybe form some committees, but the first thing that you can do is tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock in Fairfield at the Jefferson Soil and Water Conservation District is inviting everyone to come and hear a presentation, and also we will be able to give comments. And so that's the first thing that you can do if you, where is that?
Cambridge Sportplex.
Yes.
Cambridge Room at the Jefferson
At the Jefferson County Fairgrounds. So that's the first thing, that if you want to do something, because we've heard so many challenges that this state faces. And so what we need, so please come and join us tomorrow.
And just to clarify a little bit on that, they're putting together a new strategic plan, the Jefferson Conservation District is. And so tomorrow they want to take public input on what's important. And one of the 4 categories that they're focusing on is soil and water. And so it's a real opportune time to start to influence what that strategic plan should look like and what the focal points should be.
So, and who is the they that you're talking about? And is it from 8 to 10, 8 to 11, what's it?
It's 8 to 9:30 tomorrow morning, a really inconvenient time, no question about it. But it's the first of 2 public scoping meetings in which they'll take public input. They haven't scheduled a second meeting, but because they're putting together a new strategic plan, well, they're probably required by law, but also they want to hear from the public. And I actually called them up and I said, is this in earnest? Or are you checking the box? I know, I worked for government for my entire career, so I get checking the box. And I talked to the person organizing the meeting, and she said, no, it's actually an important scoping meeting for them, that they want to hear from the public what the priority should be. And the centerpiece of this is really soil and water. So it's
the they is what, DNR? Or
no, Jefferson County Conservation District. And so it really breaks down to the county but under the state. And so it's a state and county conservation district. They both have authority for it. So it is a good time. It brings it as close to home as we can when talking about water quality. And of course also putting it in the context of watersheds, which we saw tonight, that if you don't look at the entire watershed, there's no point in looking at a body of water, right? So I would really suggest, if you have any interest at all, it's a really good time for input. And there's more opportunities too.
Well, Anne kind of surprised me with coming up here. So, you know, instead of taking a lot of time, we're going to form a little committee. And Carol Simmons, you know, this is a partnership, is going to be working, and our dear John Eichert. We hope that Francis Dickey will join us, but he's not looking at me. But if you would like to help, please sign, if you'd like more information, because this just happened 2 days ago. And please, there's a little sign-up sheet, and we'll come up with committees. This will be interest driven, and I hope to work with you. We hope to work with you. So thank you.
Thank you. So we want to thank all of you for coming out here tonight. I hope most of you got well fed. Sorry we had more people than we had planned, but appreciate your attention to the issue of water quality in the state of Iowa, and also here, Lake Darling, and in Jefferson County as well. We at Southeast Iowa Sierra Club think this is a really high priority. And we are focused on climate change. We have 4 thematic areas that we're focused on right now, which you can see out on the display table as you came in. We've made huge progress in the last year and a half in these areas, and we will continue to do so over the next few years into the future. Having said that, we do think water quality is an absolute priority, and so getting together with Diana and John Eichert and others, we really would like to see a working group of some sort form on water quality. And so, as Diana said, there's sign-up sheets over there on that round table. If you have any interest in water quality, we're not going to start pestering you to join a water quality group, but we will start sending you information so that you can stay informed. And then those who want to become active can become part of this working group. You can also, as we said, participate in the Jefferson County Conservation District effort for the development of a new strategic plan starting tomorrow. And also join some of the groups that are focusing on water quality, JFAN, of course, Sierra Club, Big Sierra Club does, statewide Sierra Club does. SLC has a concern from the standpoint of looking at some of their agricultural projects that they're working on now. So you can see this is a major driver in terms of conservation issues in the state of Iowa. Probably no greater issue than water quality. And so rather than walk away pissed off, do something about it and in whatever direction is meaningful to you. But please stay involved. We all know that there's a need for change, and it only happens if we do it at our level of the community. So again, thanks everybody for being here. Thanks to those we honored tonight. Michael, great to see you, and we look forward to seeing you as volunteers and working on many of these issues that we're working on. Again, thanks again to our speakers. So we really appreciate your huge contribution to our learning this evening.
What do you want? You want to try the bus?